Hello, everyone. GleeCon here once more, and I am bringing you another episode of Lore of Warcraft with eagerness and excitement just oozing out of my pores. On the last episode, we did all of the small little one-off quests that we can to completionists, the Burning Steps as a Horde, and starting tomorrow, we will be doing a lot of quests before, leading up to, in, around, and as part of the instance itself with Blackrock Depths and Lower Blackrock Spire. So we have our work cut out with us in that particular area. And just in honor of starting the video, my dog has decided to also say hello, and she will settle down. We're going to continue reading the Warcraft movie novel. We read chapter 6 last time, which had us seeing the Alliance take Medivh, a young Khadgar, King Lane, and a small contingent out to maybe try and find an orc or whatever. They don't know who these things are yet, but we know they're orcs, and maybe get a prisoner or just find something. They come upon a site of an obvious battle when suddenly they are beset upon by orcs. So we're going to pick that up right now with chapter 7. Stay a while and listen. Hi, Pepper. Welcome to the show, Pepper the Chihuahua. We don't ever hear my husky because he's a very, very quiet boy. But the Chihuahua that is 1/10 of his size is 10 times as loud. Actually, probably more. Okay, here we go. Mother of, Sir Everin whispered. He, like the others, like Lothar himself, was frozen, rooted to the earth as the monsters charged forward. Like the trolls, they were tall, had tusks, and adorned themselves with tattoos and bones and feathers. But they were not just tall, they were massive. Their chests were enormous, their hands large enough to envelop and crush a man's skull without effort, and the weapons designed to fit such hands? The biggest one of all silenced Sir Everin before he could even finish his sentence. Towering above the others, tattoos crawling over his hands, he sprang with the speed and power of one of Stranglethorn's great cats, bringing an enormous hammer crunching down on the hapless knight. The gargantuan thing turned and almost casually hefted a shrieking horse into the air and tossed it as if it were little more than a sack of grain. 2 soldiers fell crushed beneath its weight. A female, her skin more green than brown, laughed maniacally at the spectacle. It all happened in the span of one heartbeat to the next. Sir Khyven roared in response, his voice sounding thin and high next to the bellow of the beasts. He brought his blade swinging up, knocking that of a greenish-tinted monster to the side. The creature grunted in surprise, then it looked like he grinned as he engaged the brave Khyven in earnest. Though the enemy was twice his size, Khyven managed to hold his own until the creature almost casually tore a wheel off one of the carts and slammed it into Khyven's skull. It looked up, grinning around those hideous tusks, only to stumble as Lothar's shield bashed him in the face. The thing's head jerked back, and Lothar swung his sword, slicing across the beast's jugular. Blood as green as its skin spurted forth, and the creature fell dead. Well, the rumors had been wrong about one thing, at least. The beasts were not unstoppable. Khadgar gaped at the enormous thing that had hurled a fully grown horse 15 feet. Obviously the leader of the monsters, it rampaged through the clearing, reached for a battle axe that was almost as big as Khadgar, and swung it in a wide, low arc, severing the bodies of 2 armored knights. Blood spattered everywhere, and the thing threw back its head and bellowed joyfully. All around him, wolves nearly the size of bears, white and gray and terrifying, were killing with the same speed, power, and ferocity as their riders. Khadgar dragged his horrified gaze from the carnage to see what Medivh was doing, thinking he could help. His bowels clenched even tighter when he realized that what the Guardian of Azeroth was doing was absolutely nothing. Medivh simply stood staring. One of the beasts charged toward Khadgar. The youth shouted a spell, and a blast of arcane lightning shot from his hand. It struck the creature full in the chest and sent him flying. Khadgar shook himself and, speaking quickly and clearly, cast a protective circle about himself and Medivh. The air shimmered, encasing him in a small shimmering blue bubble. If the Guardian wasn't ready to attack, at least the former novitiate would see to it that those things didn't slice them both in half. A shrill whinny behind them caused the young mage to whirl around and come face to face with one of the beasts. Lothar's sword dripped greenish-brown blood as his gaze flickered over the scene. His knights outnumbered the beasts almost 4-1, yet the monsters were overcoming them. Several good soldiers lay on the ground, either dead or dying at Callan. Callan didn't see the axe. That was about to. Lothar was moving even before his brain realized it, lunging forward, using his body, shield, and sword, all as weapons. The beast was caught completely off guard, and Lothar's sword found its mark, plunging deep into the thing's unprotected chest. Callan stared gratefully up at his father. "Don't try to take them on with brute force," Lothar panted. He kicked at the creature's corpse, rolling it off his son. "They're stronger. Be smarter." He extended his free hand to his son. Callan reached up to take it, but even as Callan's eyes flew wide in warning, Lothar felt something go around his waist that was as thick and strong as a tree trunk, and he was hurled backward. He landed hard and painfully, his sword knocked from his hand, his own armor a liability as the monster, the leader of the whole horrifying group, advanced on him, leering. The giant axe that had cut 2 men in half mere moments before was nowhere to be seen. The beast had thrown it or abandoned it, or simply decided he didn't want it anymore. Lothar neither knew nor cared. Hot saliva dripped onto his face as the beast leader raised a hammer with an oversized right hand, reaching for Lothar with the other. Refusing to accept the inevitable, Lothar put his hands down beside his waist in a doubtless futile attempt to rise. His right hand brushed something unfamiliar, and for a moment he didn't realize what it was, and then he remembered. It's a boomstick. He'd stuck it in his belt and completely forgotten about it until now. Lothar was able to get Magni's gift out far enough to aim it at the descending hand. The beast's enormous fingers clamped down on the weapon. Lothar squeezed the small movable part. The resulting blast almost deafened him, but the scream that followed was still audible. The beast staggered back, staring at the smoking ruin of flesh at the end of his arm. The beast was huge, with brown skin and 2 yellowed tusks jutting upward from his oversized lower jaw. 2 thick braids hung down on either side of his ears, the rest of the black length braided or flowing freely. Ears the size of Khadgar's hands were pointed and pierced. Like the other beasts, this one wore primitive jewelry of bones and beads. He held an enormous axe in one hand. With the other, he touched with surprising delicacy the magical field that was all that stood between him and the mages. His eyes were clear, brown, and calm. Behind those eyes, Khadgar realized, was an intelligent brain. And that was the most frightening thing of all. "Guardian!" Khadgar shouted, his voice climbing. The cry seemed to knock Medivh out of whatever trance he was in. He began to chant, light following the motions of his weaving fingers like ink from a pen, until a sigil hung in the air. The beast lowered his hand, his 2 intelligent eyes going at once to Medivh, watching closely, curiously. There were several sudden blazes of sickly green light. Khadgar gasped, and the beast leaped back, both sets of eyes focused on the clearing. He's using the fel anyway. Khadgar had noticed that some of the beasts had undertones of green in their skin, the color of fel magic. He had not had time to discuss, anything with Medivh upon their arrival, but he was certain the Guardian had noticed it as well. Now as he stared, all the beasts who had that particular coloring dropped their weapons and started to convulse, screaming. Jagged, spindly fingers of green lightning leaped from the stricken creatures, arcing directly back to Medivh, who stood with his hands outstretched, palms up. Before Khadgar's eyes, the beast's skins paled, their muscles atrophied, and one by one they fell crumbling like pieces of hard earth in the hands of a child. A spontaneous cheer of relief went up from the knights as they saw their chance. "They're all dying!" someone shouted. "Only the green ones!" another cried. They fell on the spasming beasts, impaling them with swords and then turning on their shocked brethren. "Kill that beast bastard!" an officer shouted, pointing toward the leader. The beast with the ruined hand looked around in obvious confusion. Khadgar flinched as another boom from Lothar's weapon resounded. A hole appeared in the massive chest of one of the monsters. He stared down at it for an instant, then tumbled, stone dead. The beast who had been standing outside the protective circle whirled, catching his companion. He cradled the monstrous form, grief plain on his ugly face. Khadgar blinked. Somehow this surprised him, but the creature's expression shifted from concerned and caring to coldly furious as he looked at the man who had slain his friend. "Let's put some steel through these bastards!" Lothar's voice rang out. The beast rose, simultaneously releasing the corpse with gentleness and preparing himself to attack Lothar. Before Khadgar could even form the words of warning, though, the beast's comrades seized him and hauled him off. With a final furious glare, the beast leaped onto Medivh's horse, yanked on the reins, and galloped into the woods. The others followed, most on their wolves, but many with stolen horses, and in a heartbeat the clearing was as empty as it had been when the knights had arrived, save for the grim scattering of corpses. Behind Khadgar, Medivh gave a low, soft moan. Khadgar turned to see the guardian of Azeroth down on one knee, pale and exhausted, the heels of his hands pressing into his temples. "Guardian!" Khadgar stammered. He started to move toward Medivh, but the other waved him off as he got unsteadily to his feet. What did you do?" Medivh ignored him utterly, focusing his attention on swiftly drawing another circle in the dirt. Frustrated, Khadgar persisted. "The fell. I was right, wasn't I? It's here." Again he thought of the green tint to the skin of some of the beasts and the lightning that leapt from them to Medivh as they flailed and grew weak. Then abruptly he recognized the sigils the Guardian was sketching into the soil. Another teleportation? "What are you doing? Where are you going?" Now Medivh did look at him, his green-blue eyes piercing, it seemed, straight into Khadgar's soul. "Get these soldiers safely back to Stormwind." He stepped into the circle. "I must return to Karazhan." He paused. "You did well today." There was a pulse of white light. Khadgar was left blinking from the brightness, staring at exactly nothing. "Where's he gone?" Lothar's shout was both worried and angry as he cantered up to Khadgar. Khadgar realized his mouth was dry. He clenched his fist to stop his hands from trembling. He knew it wasn't the fight that had stunned and spooked him so badly. "Karazhan," he told Lothar quietly. Lothar swore, pressed his lips together, then shook his head. "We need a prisoner. Where's your horse?" "They took my horse." "Really?" Lothar's look of contempt could have withered an entire forest. "Just stay there." Lothar galloped off with a pair of knights. Khadgar fought back the urge to knock him off with a spell, looked at the empty space where the Guardian of Azeroth ought to have been, and sighing, turned his attention to examining the body of one of the beasts. Nothing was as Durotan had expected. He had backed down in his earlier clash with Blackhand, but the longer that this harvesting of the creatures he was told to call humans continued, the less he liked it. Today, at least, he did not feel sullied by his actions. Today, the humans had fought back, even taking Kurvosh and others with them. It was unexpected, but at least Kurvosh had died in battle, and Durotan would sing a Lokvad Nod for him. At least he would if he lived long enough. The humans had rallied after the strange attack from the older human in the unpassable circle. Until he had agreed to join Gul'dan on this trek to this world of Azeroth, Durotan had never seen anything like it, and now he had seen two similar spells. What had their shaman done? Or was he a warlock? Perhaps Drekthar could help him understand. The Frostwolves had only lost a few warriors, but the humans were still in pursuit. Durotan had no desire to add any more of his clan to the ranks of the fallen until they understood what they were up against. He crouched low over the stolen riding beast, his huge hands on its head directing its panicked flight. He caught movement out of the corner of his eye, something green. It was Garona, Gul'dan's slave. She was still a prisoner, except now she was bound to the dead. The length of chain that started at her scrawny neck led to a pale corpse, one of the green-tinged orcs that had been so mysteriously killed. She was struggling, trying to break the chain, glancing back the way Durotan had come. With no weapons, bound to a dead minder, and so much weaker than a true full-blooded orc, she was pitifully easy prey for the humans. They would cut through her tiny body with a single stroke of one of their small swords. Durotan should just leave her. Such a thing as she was not worth risking his people for. But it had been Garona the slave who had tried to warn Durotan against Gul'dan the second time the warlock had visited the Frostwolves, and certainly since the clan had joined the Horde, Durotan had started to regret not heeding her words. Andraka had felt sympathy and kindness toward her, seeing in the half-orc a reflection of her own temporary exile from the Frostwolves. Durotan made his decision. He turned the animal's head toward the female, lifted Sever, and brought the great war axe crashing down on the iron chain. It parted easily, and he reached out his hand to her, ready to swing her behind him and bear her to safety. Garona stared at his extended hand. Her gaze flickered to his face, and for a moment she hesitated. Then she ran, darting into the forest back the way they both had come. She would rather die as an orc than live as a slave. It was a choice that almost guaranteed her death, but Durotan understood it. He found he could not blame her. Fell. It was, Khadgar was almost certain, what he was seeing, flowing between the beast and Medivh, but there was no sign of it in this corpse anymore. No telltale green mist seeping out from its mouth when, mindful of the seemingly razor-sharp teeth, Khadgar had opened its lips to test for the taint. He paused. Something wasn't right here. He got to his feet, looking around. The remaining knights were tending to the wounded, preparing the human corpses for respectful transportation home, and the beast corpses for a somewhat less respectful journey. The young mage closed his eyes for a moment, tuning into the natural world around him. The rustle of leaves in the wind, the hum of insects, bird song. No bird song, just as there had been no bird song when. He whirled around, hand outstretched, fingers splayed, magic crackled in his palm, and he shoved, hard. The intruder who had just leaped from above him was struck by the spell. The beast was pinned in the air, its back against the rough bark of a huge tree, snarling down at him and writhing impotently. Khadgar's eyes widened as he got a good look at the beast he had just captured. "Over here!" he shouted, not taking his eyes from his prisoner. He heard the sound of hoofbeats behind him, and then Lothar was there. So it was a huge beast, unconscious and strapped across a second horse. "You got a prisoner," Khadgar said. "So did you," Lothar replied. "You took it alone." "Yes." For a moment, Lothar looked impressed, but then the expression was gone. He eyed the captive. "Looks like the runt of the litter," Khadgar sighed. All right, so First Contact. Pretty good. Pretty cool. I've always thought there was a strange, dichotomy when you could say, in a straight-up hand-to-hand battle, obviously orcs would whoop butt, and yet that is not the case when you play the game. So there's just got to be something. In this case, the element of surprise and technologies that don't really exist, or at least not known by the orcs. But if you think about WoW Classic, now that's all gone. Everyone can be everything. Orcs use guns. Orcs can be mages. Humans can be warlocks, whatever. All of that is gone. So what do you really have? Why? Well, there's got to be something, there has to be, whether it's a little bit of nimbleness more, whether the way in which they wear their armor, is a little different. Something has to be evening the odds, and where hit points are not your actual measure of your vitality. And your DPS is coming from something else, It's just, there's definitely some hand waving that goes on in the overall lore, translating into a video game. All right, this was a good chapter, and I enjoyed reading it with you guys. If you did too, keep on keeping on. Subscribe, comment, and stay tuned to the next episode of Lore of Warcraft. This one's in the pipe. 5x5.